So Lost Soul aside, that's a game in which I'm really excited to definitely check out, and it is gonna be released on August 28th, 2025. Yes, just in a few days. So that being said, I want to talk about whether or not I would think Lost Soul aside will run on the Steam Deck, as well as give a breakdown about the important things to note about Lost Soul aside if you're interested in the game. Let's check it out. Now, as far as Lost Soul aside goes, will it run on the Steam Deck? I believe that Lost Soul aside will potentially run on the Steam Deck for two main reasons. The first reason that I believe that Lost Soul aside will run on the Steam Deck is based on the gaming engine that Lost Soul aside was made from. Okay, Lost Soul aside was developed using Unreal Engine 4, and Unreal Engine 4, in case you are not tech savvy, it is the same Unreal Engine that made Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, as well as Stellar Blade. All these games, they all run pretty well on the Steam Deck, especially when you do a bit of tinkering, so there is a high chance that potentially Lost Soul aside will be able to run on the Steam Deck in some shape or form. However, if you are not convinced by this, there's also a second reason in which I believe that Lost Soul aside could have a high chance of being able to run on the Steam Deck, and that is due to the development stage and whatnot. Lost Soul aside, the thing about the game is that it was first initially developed back in 2014. Yes, 11 freaking years all the way up till now. And then it wasn't until 2016 when the game was first revealed. So I'm not gonna go into detail as to why it took so long to develop, but basically what I'm saying is that since it is a game that was originally in the works in 2014, it is basically a game that was made with the architecture that was a decade ago. So with that being said, you know, a lot of games that were developed back in 2014, they all run on the Steam Deck really well. So with that being said, I feel like Lost Soul aside, there could be a chance for it to run decently well with the Steam Deck. I don't see any kind of gameplay or any details on that, so take it with a grain of salt. But all I'm saying is that we could potentially be able to experience Lost Soul aside on the Steam Deck based on the past history with the Unreal Engine 4, as well as the time when Lost Soul aside was actually developed. Now that I gave my reasoning about whether or not I think Lost Soul aside will run on the Steam Deck, I want to transition into talking about the additions that you're expected to get if you were to buy Lost Soul aside. Now, as far as Lost Soul aside goes, if you pre-purchase the game, you actually get to receive some bonuses. You get to receive Kaiser's initial reveal outfit, the origin, 10x high potion in-game items, as well as 500 Divinity's gold in-game coins. Now, as far as Lost Soul aside goes, there are two editions that you can choose from. You have the standard edition, which is $60 and just comes with the base game itself bare bones, as well as you get a digital deluxe edition, which is $70, in which it includes the base game obviously, the 3-weapon fragment cosmetics, Genesis Thunder, Everlasting Ember, as well as Crystal of Abysses. As well as you also get the arena skin Golden Blaze, Ruby Necklace Health Booster, Gemstone Badge XP Booster, digital soundtrack, as well as last but not least, the digital art book. So yeah, now that I gave a breakdown on the additions to buy for Lost Soul aside, as well as the contents and whatnot, I want to transition into talking about the actual meat, what to expect from the gameplay of Lost Soul aside. Now, as far as Lost Soul aside goes, it is primarily an action game with linear structure and story, as well as there is a wide variety of explorable areas in which you can also go around with various branching paths. Now, as far as movements goes with Lost Soul aside, it is actually really fun and as well as flashy. You get to jump, you get to dash, you get to glide, you get to dragon flight, and many more. Now, as far as the game goes, as you go about in your important mission, there is also a companion that tags alongside you, which is a symbolic dragon vibed entity known as the Arena, in which it can transform into various weapons as well as grant different types of elements which will help you in your journey. Now, as far as weapons goes, there are 4 weapons in which you can use your advantage. You have the sword for close-up slicing, you have the great sword, which is slower but deals heavier strikes, you have the pole blade, which is a ranged sword which showers bullets and projectiles and flashy strikes at enemies, as well as you got the sieve, which is a mixture of elements from various weapon types. And as far as these weapons goes, each weapon has skills in which you can keep that are active and map them to the various face buttons that you have. Now, as far as Lost Soul Aside goes, based on my research, again, take it with a grain of salt, is that you can swap between those different types of swords in mid-combat, which I find really cool and really awesome because it basically allows for more room to strategize as to how to deal with specific enemies, as there are also a variety of different enemies as well as bosses to encounter, and where they all have different patterns, different movesets, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could potentially die. So I just love how you can swap between different swords for different kind of scenarios and different situations. And speaking of enemies, sometimes there will be a glow on the top of the enemy, basically serving as color codes to what they will plan to attack very soon. For instance, if it is a blue glow, the enemy is about to execute a charge attack in which you must input a counter attack to stun the enemy and make it vulnerable. And where sometimes an enemy will show a red glow on the top, which basically signifies that they are gonna execute an unblockable attack, in which a normal block or a dodge attack will unfortunately not cut it, in which you must perfectly parry in order to defend against the deadly blow. And if you either time the attacks wrongly or do the wrong input, you could face heavy damage. So that is something really important to note, that you gotta master all sorts of techniques as much as you can and be able to implement them in a timely manner. Again, this is something in which I researched and in which I don't know because I don't have a review copy for it, and I will have to confirm it with you all when I do a follow-up, sharing my thoughts about it once I pick up the game. But basically, based on my research, it suggests that those swords that you use are not set in stone and that you can change it in mid-game and whatnot. Again, I could be totally wrong. But anyways, as far as Lost Soul Aside goes in the gameplay-wise, there's also a skill tree with traditional leveling up system in which you can earn XP and level up a character, which will unlock more abilities as well as enhance current skills as well. And as far as Lost Soul Aside goes, it is often described as a game which blends Final Fantasy as well as Devil May Cry games and mash it together. Now, personally, I have not played Final Fantasy games. I don't know why, I never got around to it, but I do want to get around to it later on. But anyways, as far as this game goes, as somebody who has played a lot of Devil May Cry games, I could see that there are some resemblance gameplay-wise to Devil May Cry series. As far as this game goes, it heavily relies on mastering combo burst mechanics, and where you can chain attacks together in quick successions. And what I didn't realize that when you chain the different attacks, according to gameplay footage from other YouTubers that I researched, it appears that there will be a letter grade in the combat, kind of similar to how the Devil May Cry games goes, where if you do the attacks really well and really smoothly and do a lot of hits without being hit, there is a letter grade, and that is something that is just really cool. Now, as far as the letter grade goes, I would say this, is that I do feel that Lost Soul Aside, the letter grades are not nearly as fancy as Devil May Cry ones. What I mean by that is that the Devil May Cry games, they don't just give a letter grade, but they also have a tagline. Like, for example, if you get a grade A, it will be atomic in one of the Devil May Cry games. However, as far as Lost Soul Aside goes, they just give a letter and that's it. Again, not a make or break, but that's just something to note, that it's cool that Lost Soul Aside, they borrow some kind of resembled extra spice into the game. Now, as far as the lettering grades goes, does that make you potentially gain more experience points? I don't know. That part I have to play in order to find out. But it's just cool that as far as Lost Soul Aside goes, it just has these extra flavors that just makes it more interesting in my opinion. Overall, I'm just really excited for Lost Soul Aside. I'm really interested to try out the game. There are a lot of questions that remain unanswered for me. I'm always curious about the lore of the game, as well as the story, as well as the characters. All I know about the story is that you're basically going on a mission to save your sister, as well as save the humanities from an alien invasion. That's all I know about it, since I don't like to get too much spoilers before playing a game, so I didn't do much research on the story and setting of the game too much. But I do see that there could be a potential deep lore as well as a deep story to Lost Soul Aside on top of the amazing gameplay mechanics in which I see so far. So yeah, it is something in which I have a really great impression on so far. But again, I don't have a review copy yet, so I cannot play it yet. So we shall wait and see. And I will definitely share my thoughts after playing Lost Soul Aside on the Steam Deck and do a follow-up video for this before you buy guide as usual. But anyways, are you excited for Lost Soul Aside? Is it a game that is for you? Is it a game in which you will pick up right now? Or do you potentially want to wait for a sale before picking up Lost Soul Aside? We'd love to discuss in the comment section below. And as always, if you love gaming reviews, gaming lists, gaming discussions, and everything related to the Steam Deck, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe so you'll not miss another video. I try to post Mondays at 6 p.m. Pacific time and occasionally Fridays, so stay tuned. Once again, my name is Joanne from the Nomadic Gaming Guild, and game on!